Hi, welcome to the first of a new series called Comedy Heroes, where I'll be looking at the lives of half a dozen funny Scottish people. I'm Paul English, and later on I'll be talking about and to Ronnie Corbett and Arnold Brown. But this week I start with Armando Iannucci.
And I've got to start by stressing that the political situation at the moment is very fluid. As we record this show, Tony Blair is still Prime Minister for an historic third day. But that could all change by the time this goes out. So to give us the latest state of play on Blair's position, throughout the show we'll be hearing from top political expert Gordon Brown, who'll be on hand to tell how long the Prime Minister will last. Gordon.
6 months.
Thank you, Gordon. Now, of course, as we go on through the night, that figure could come down, couldn't it, Gordon?
18 weeks.
So, as I say, very fluid out there indeed.
Very funny out there indeed. Out there in Radio 4 land, anyway, where Armando's biting blend of satirical sketches and outright lies are combined in his charm offensive show. But our man Armando is responsible for far more than just laughs over on Radio 4. This is the genius who conceived the memorably rubbish radio DJ Alan Partridge. He also co-produced cult comedy The Mary Whitehouse Experience. And last year he was the creative force behind The Thick of It, the superb spin doctor satire which won a BAFTA. Armando's also responsible for Permatand lottery presenter Dale Winton as a suicide bomber, my favourite network comedy of last year, BBC Two's Time Trumpet. Throw in a hat-trick of National Comedy Awards and talk of an American remake of The Thick of It, and Armando Iannucci's position in the British comedy landscape needs very little spin doctoring. But despite becoming a top beak in the comedy pecking order down in the smoke, Armando's influences lie closer to his Glasgow roots. You've talked about the influence people like Billy Connolly have had on you. Do you carry that with you? That I mean, is there a sense of Scottish comedy in what you're doing, despite the fact that it's now based in London?
Yeah, I mean, there's elements of sort of Chick Murray and Arnold Brown and Ricky Fulton and stuff. I mean, that's what I grew up on, and that it's a very sort of conversational type of comedy, I think, but also it enjoys playing with words. I mean, the great thing about Billy Connolly is that, you know, he's one of the most fantastic stand-ups in the world, but he doesn't seem like a stand-up in that he doesn't come on and just rattle off his 50 jokes. He has a sort of a chat. You get the feeling that the conversation he's having is just for you in the audience. It's not going to be replicated the next night or the night after that.
Armando's come a long way since being spotted by Scottish comedian Andy Cameron. They were in an Oxford Union debate about whether the Scots were funnier than the English. The Scots won, of course. Then he spent a year messing about in the recording studios of Radio Scotland. But in the late 1980s, he packed his bags and headed south to join the light entertainment department in London. He had an early impact there, with an idea which eventually became the news parody show On the Hour.
On the Hour, which was like a fake news programme developed out of a training course I went on as a rookie radio producer, where we were trained in how to make sort of feature and sort of documentary type shows. And I was on this course with lots of other journalists. And I thought, well, I want to make comedy shows. I don't want to make news programmes. But why not use all these journalists and all their experiences and let's make a show that is completely false but sounds like a news programme. So let's cut it like a news programme, use jingles and edits the way we do in a news programme, interview people we do the way we do in a news programme, and then edit it later. So I did a sort of overtly straight news parody, really. And that became the basis for On the Hour. I sort of then gave it to the head of light entertainment and radio, and he said, we should do this properly. We should do this as a series. So they gave me a bit more money, and I made a pilot, and I got in touch with Chris Morris, who was presenting a radio show on local radio in London at the time, but he was doing sort of news parodies. So I just got in touch with him and got in touch with various people who I thought could maybe improvise and sound very naturalistic, like Steve Coogan and Rebecca Front and so on. And we just came together for the pilot, and it just all kind of clicked, really.
My hand's pointing to the 12. I am on the hour.
On the Hour.
Such is politics. It's a painful business.
On the Hour.
Armando's biographer Justin Lewis reckons improvisation was one of the key reasons for On the Hour's success.
One of the interesting things he did with On the Hour when he brought together these people, he was very keen to find people who are good at improvising. So Whereas most radio comedy shows, most television comedy shows, operate from a script that is generally held to be sacrosanct. There might be the odd rewrite here and there, but that'll be it. What Iannucci did with On the Hour was he would have like an idea or a kind of almost like a storyline, and then he'd get the team of actors to come in and improvise around that idea.
And ever since then, journalists have been running in the opposite direction whenever they see you.
Well, it's funny. It's that thing of, I get this a lot, which is journalists coming up to me saying, for example, that Alan Partridge, there's someone in our office who's just like him. So it's never them. It's always someone they know.
Yeah, it's one of my friends.
Yeah.
Time now for Alan Partridge. Got some sport for us?
Certainly have, Chris.
Great.
And just some late-night soccer results. Here they are for Division 2. Sheffield Bonanza 1, Dynamo Aberdare 4, Manchester Coherent 2, Gil Morel 2. And the Scottish Division 1 game between Taste of Dunfermline and Strathcarnage cannot be stopped. Good night.
Journalist Siobhan Sinnott worked with Armando on Know the Archie Macpherson show at Radio Scotland in the late 80s. He told her how he struck up a relationship with Steve Coogan soon after moving to Radio 4. That's when the mischievous media baiting began.
I think there's always been something with Armando that's been fascinated by news and the way we use it. I remember going down to see him when he just started working for BBC Radio Network, and he played me a tape of Steve Coogan impersonating Neil Kinnock, blowing his top, which is funny enough. But he said, and we played this to the Sun, and they've offered to buy it. So we've asked them for quite a lot of money to be left in a bin at midnight near King's Cross with a signed picture of the Sun editor in a heart-shaped frame. And they've done it!
Ah, the good old tabloid press, eh? Who said we were gullible? On the Hour proved so successful it was developed for telly as the day-to-day. The surreal TV news parody proved even more popular in the box than it had been in the wireless, with Armando and co-creator Chris Morris winning gongs at the 1994 Comedy Awards.
Time now for the weather from Sylvester Stewart on the Weather Pinball. Starting tonight in the southwest, where it should rain in drops the size of a wrestler, but fortunately, most of the rain, they're not quite reaching the ground. On now to Scotland and the north of England, quite warm, about the temperature of a cow. However, a very stupid area of low pressure moving in from the Midlands will bring some heavy breezes later on, a bit like the first rush of euphoria induced by a large dose of heroin. On to the northeast, there'll be some heavy thunder there, about as loud as a woman. So the summary then? Cool showers wet, cool showers wet, cool showers wet, cool showers wet, cool showers wet.
The day-to-day, you've since pointed out that actually, as much as that started out being a parody of news that wasn't quite being made that way at the time,
Yes.
It now is.
Yes.
Does that concern you? Or?
It worries me deeply. I'm slightly concerned that some people in news have said, the way we do news now, we've slightly taken our cue from the day-to-day. So rather than kill that sort of news, it's actually spawned it in a sort of Frankenstein-esque, I have created a monster kind of thing, which saddens me. Someone told me that he's a presenter on News 24 and so on, and he was telling me that he was out covering the British and American invasion of Afghanistan. And they said there was him and lots of war journalists, war correspondents, all holed up in a hotel in Kabul because the fighting was very fierce outside and they had to stay in this hotel. And he said to while away the hours, someone put on the war edition of the Day-to-Day. And I just thought, that's not what you should be doing, really.
It's hardly Vera Lynn, is it?
You shouldn't be doing that. And I remember in the war edition of the Day-to-Day, Doon McKean's on the back of a Jeep and she kind of batters a door down of some house that's in the middle of the battle zone. And then in her combat gear, with a monitor next to her, hands over to Chris, who's standing next to her, but in his sort of presenter's suit. And during the invasion of Iraq, I saw on News at 10, Bill Neely in combat gear on the back of a Jeep, going with the army as they battered the door down of Saddam's palace in Basra. Then it cut to him live in his combat gear, saying, "Over to you, Trevor," handing over to Trevor McDonald, who was standing next to him in his suit. And I just thought, so nothing really has changed in 10 years, except one is meant to be stupid fiction and the other is sad fact.
Unfortunately, the truth. You sit at home with your head in your hands.
Yeah.
News has just come through, and I'm afraid it's war. This report from our reporter, Peter Porter. It's the high priest of battles. It started when the minister cut the ribbon and declared the war open. My name's Peter Porter. This is my war. Blinking like a groggy giraffe with dust in its eye caught in the 7,000-watt beam of a low-flying aircraft on the darkest night of the year, I stumbled from my bunker this morning. The bunker I had dug with the men from the battalion. Good men, strong men, each one capable of pulling the trunk off a cock elephant at 30 yards. And now my comrades and friends too, allowing me to wear combat clothes and run ahead of the tanks into battle. As I speak, swarms of missiles narrowly miss my head. There goes one. I'm running over to see now how many of my new friends are just so much charred flesh and bone. My right arm's just been blown off. There's a camera crew. Look at me, my right arm's just been blown off.
He managed to make the whole thing sound very believable, so that if you weren't quite listening, if you had like half an ear on it, you would think to yourself, oh, well, there really are horses running amok on the underground. And you kind of, half a second later, you'd go, oh, no, obviously that's nonsense, and you'd laugh.
And on, into battle. Oh, there goes my other arm. The sound you can hear now is my lower torso being vaporized, but never mind, it's not my safety that counts. Information is paramount. Strap my head to the rocket and blast me into the center of battle. 13 megaton warheads exploding all around. Rivers of blood. I counted them out. Oh, sorry, the sound effects. The sound effects broken. Bugger. Sodding sound effects.
On the hour, in the thick of the action, with a microphone.
The Day Today was groundbreaking TV. It launched the careers of Chris Morris and Steve Coogan and influenced later comedies like Drop the Dead Donkey and The Office. And it gave birth to one of the biggest comedy characters of the 1990s, Alan Partridge. Knowing Me, Knowing You and I'm Alan Partridge spawned mainstream catchphrases and 7-digit viewing figures. Often a curse and a blessing.
And you like surprises. And we have now got a surprise for you, because it's time once again to go up Alan's sleeve. Earlier on, I had a horse up my sleeve and a jump for Sue Lewis. Well, people are asking, Alan, what have you got up your other sleeve? Well, it's a child. I've got a child up my sleeve.
Hey, what's going on?
And Keith, it's a child you know very well because you produced him. He's here tonight, your very own son, Sam Hunt.
Oh,
Keith.
Right, Sam.
Right, Sam. Keith, Sam is your only son from your marriage, which was dissolved some years ago. Now, because of access and custody laws, you're only allowed to see him once a fortnight, so you're not allowed contact with him tonight, but I can speak to him, so you wait here while I go and talk to Sam Hunt. Hello, little Sarah.
Sam, it's Dad.
Right, now, I believe, Keith, you've got something very special to say to Sam today. It's a very special day.
Yeah, looking forward to next weekend, Sam. We'll have a fun day out. Take you to the footy.
No, isn't there something else you want to say to him?
You see your dad on the telly last week?
No. Sam, do you want to tell your daddy?
It's my birthday.
It's your son's birthday!
Quite a lot of these shows, obviously, on the hour led to the Day Today, and that then spawned, Knowing Me, Knowing You, and I Am Alan Partridge.
Yes.
These shows, I suppose, maybe as close as your kind of brand of comedy has ever come to catchphrase comedy. Was there ever a sense of you having to go, OK, step back from this now, we've created the monster?
As we were doing Partridge, we never appreciated how big a monster it would become. So we just thought, Alan going, aha, at the beginning of his show and on that bombshell at the end, and in I'm Alan Partridge, he said things like, kiss my face whenever, Jurassic Park, whenever something good happened. But it just sort of emerged in the three of us, it was myself, Steve Coogan, Peter Benham, write it, and we'd be in an office all day, and we'd sort of be slightly improvising it. So almost being Alan in a way as we were doing it. And these little phrases would come out and they would just make us laugh and we'd write them down. So we didn't really realise that they would become catchphrases. I mean, we did in the Day Today, Alan does a sort of World Cup commentary thing, and he does one where he goes, "Oh, eat my goal," and suddenly this record came out called "Eat My Goal," and I started thinking, do we get any money out of this? I mean, should we be onto our agents here? And it suddenly became quite scary. You know, you think you say anything, suddenly people are saying it all over the place. And there was an element of, in the second series of I'm Alan Partridge, where I wondered whether we became a little bit more self-conscious of the fact that if we got him to say things like back of the net, whether people would pick up on that. So I think it was at that point that we started thinking, no, we should stop now.
What have you got for him? No, Keith, you stay there, you know the law. There you go, your daddy's got you £10. Nice, but don't despair, because we've got you a present. We've got you an Alan Partridge tie and blazer badge combination pack. There we go. There we go, you take that. And not only that, we've got him an all-expenses-paid trip to Disneyland with your mummy and her partner this weekend.
No, I've got custody this weekend. She knows that.
No, it's been arranged.
No, I've got custody. She knows it.
Let's ask Sam. Where are you going this weekend?
Disneyland.
Disneyland! Of course, you Island of Terror. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Hunt. That way. Great. Oh, marvellous. Funny feeling that backfired a bit.
At the Comedy Awards that year, they awarded him a special award, which they had never done before and they've never done since, which was just basically saying, well, even in quite a good year for comedy, which it was, you changed the landscape, really.
I think Armando has been one of the most successful Scottish exports.
Colin Gilbert runs the comedy unit, creators of Rab C. Nesbitt and Still Game.
He is a brilliant comedy producer. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The day-to-day and knowing me, knowing you, all that stuff with Steve Coogan is brilliant. And he himself, as a sort of performer, has been excellent.
The Armando Iannucci shows, one particular scene stands out, the sketch that involved you dying.
Oh, right.
And going
yes.
to heaven and meeting St. Peter at the gates and I'm taking you in and showing you the paradise of television and all the shows, all the best shows in the world, except for viewers in Scotland.
That's
you know,
right,
was that a frustration for you? Was that
Yes.
a comment back on your days at home?
You meet any sort of expat Scot, you say that phrase, that's except for viewers in Scotland who have their own programmes, and there's a sort of tensing up of all the muscles as they kind of just think, oh, I grew up with that. I don't know if it happens now, but I certainly remember during the school holidays, because the Scottish holidays didn't coincide with the English holidays, all through our summer, we got nothing on the telly apart from the last week, which coincided with the start of the English holidays,
right.
when we started getting, very old Robinson Crusoes and stuff like that. But then we'd go back to school, and as if to taunt us, those children's programmes would still carry on for 5 weeks.
That's except for viewers in Scotland who've got their own programmes. Every night I have a terrible, dreadful dream about that phrase. And in that dream I die and go to heaven. And in heaven I meet St. Peter, and he says to me, "Welcome to heaven. It's a multi-channel paradise showing every programme ever made, including all the ones you didn't see in Scotland. Come in." And St. Peter points to a Clive James end-of-the-year show, which viewers in Scotland didn't get because they were watching a Hogmanay special. And over there, he says, is the very first terrestrial showing of Terminator 2, which viewers in Scotland missed because they were watching a failed Dougie Donnelly chat show. Up there is the first ever live interview with an alien, which viewers in Scotland never got to see because they were watching a Paul Coyer quiz show about hills.
The Armando Iannucci shows, I think, is probably the warmest thing he's done. But it's really about modern neurosis and what he worries about and what we all worry about,
And down there is that programme that showed you how to turn base metals into gold and gave you the secret of eternal youth, which viewers in Scotland never saw because you were watching a 6-part cartoon series about Gaelic accidents. This, says St. Peter, is where the dead can watch the telly. And then he turns to me and says, "That's except for the dead of Scotland who have their own heaven." And he shows me Scottish heaven. And Scottish heaven consists of a bald man who tells me what a great country Scotland is because it invented golf, it discovered penicillin, and it has the songs of Runrig. and outside everyone was watching some newly recorded Blackadder and guilt-free porn. So I just lost it. And St. Peter grows angry and casts me out of Scottish heaven and down into Scottish hell. And Scottish hell consists of a portrait of Ally MacLeod, a frightening tartan drummer girl, and a giant computer scoreboard flashing up what Scotland's goal difference is and why it means we'll go out after the first round. And to one side is a man behind a desk, and that man says to me, "Armando Iannucci, you've elected to go for Paul Coyer's Hill Challenge. This for 10 bonus points. Which Scottish hill has the most sides?" A question I know I can never answer, so I'm condemned to watching a 1,000-part documentary about the life of John Logie Baird, a Scotsman who invented television, but didn't realise we wouldn't be allowed to watch the ruddy thing.
Ah, yes, the glorious days before multi-channel cable deals and Sky Plus. After this brief interlope to Channel 4 for the Armando Iannucci shows, he returned to the BBC to begin work on a political satire set in the bowels of Westminster. The show starred Peter Capaldi as the Labour spin doctor Malcolm Tucker, and it won a string of gongs at the Comedy Awards. Colin Gilbert loves the thick of it, but he isn't so keen on the precedent it's set.
One of the sharpest political sitcoms there ever has been. I mean, I think it's far sharper than Yes Minister because it's less affectionate. And, of course, it's been made for Tuppence Halfpenny, which we're now all being encouraged to do, so I'm not going to thank him for that.
Much of the thick of it was improvised. I think it was, what was it they said, about 30% of it?
Yeah, I mean, what we do is we come in, we've got a script, spend a lot of work on the script, and we go in, we shoot the script, but I then ask the performers to do the scene again, but in their own words, sort of following the script, but if suddenly somebody says something that isn't in the script, they should respond to that rather than try and crowbar in the next written line. And what it fundamentally means is it roughs it up a bit and it makes it feel much more natural, much more realistic. And you kind of get all the words that are on the script anyway, but in a slightly different order. And it just feels it feels spontaneous, even though it's still 80%. In any one programme, about 80% of it is still the script and 20% of it has emerged out of the improvisation.
And in fact, that's why a programme like The Thick of It is such a tense viewing, because what you get is actors who are probably genuinely terrified. They've been given a situation, and what you see there is a slight sort of white terror in the eyes of trying to come up with something funny, but also the knowledge that every take they do is being filmed, and they're just trying to see where they can go with that.
Oscar winner or not, filling the shoes of Malcolm Tucker has been Peter Capaldi's proudest moment to date. With talk of an American remake of the series, Armando could be in line for transatlantic gongs. Maybe. But even then, you'd probably still walk past him in the street. Siobhan Sinnott thinks that's exactly how her old chum likes it.
He's one of these polymaths. The Jonathan Miller of comedy, if you like. He can do quite a lot of things. He writes for The Telegraph, he writes for The Guardian, he writes sketch shows, he collaborates with Steve Coogan about Alan Partridge. But I think it's not Armando's big ambition to be at the head of things. I think that's one of his strengths as a comedian. He doesn't have the ego problem that sometimes blinkers comedians to their strengths.
You were the visiting professor this year, weren't you, of broadcast and media
yes.
at Oxford University.
Yes.
Series of lectures on whether British comedy is dead or alive.
That's right, yes.
We don't have time for a series of lectures.
No, I'm sorry about that.
Is it dead or alive?
It's alive. It could die, but the very fact that we're discussing whether it is dead or alive gives us hope that it might stay alive.
What would have to happen for it to die in order for comedy to die? You know, where are we at?
I did a bit of research on this, and I dug out the number of hours of comedy that was made for telly 20 years ago, and it's about 3 times as much as is now.
Really?
And it feels now that there's comedy everywhere. There's comedy on BBC 3 and 4 and whatever, and the stand-up circuit and DVDs and so on. But in fact, I think what we're very good at now is making cult comedy. So we make stuff that's great, like, Peep Show and my stuff, that gets a devoted but small audience. And what we've lost the knack of is making the big hits, the stuff on BBC One and ITV that gets huge numbers.
But I don't suppose we'll be seeing Dale Winton, the suicide bomber, on BBC One after Strictly Come Dancing. I'm Paul English, and this week my comedy hero has been Armando Iannucci. Thanks for listening. Join me next week at the same time.